Welcome to a special edition of the Darden Admissions Podcast. I'm your host, Brett Twitty, and you are listening to a new episode. In this episode of the podcast, I'm excited to continue our ongoing spotlight on learning through the case method with a conversation featuring 3 students from our Part-Time MBA Class of 2025, Zach Gore, Aman and Zoe Chan. If you have questions about what it's like to learn through the case method, how students prepare for class, the impact of this learning experience, really the list goes on, you have come to the right place. So without further ado, here's my interview with Zach Gore, Aman and Zoe Chan, 3 first-year students from our Part-Time MBA Class of 2025. Aman, Zach, Zoe, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Brett. Thanks for having us.
It's great to have you here. This is officially our second Part-Time MBA podcast ever. So a little bit of history. We had your classmates, Max and Parker, on to talk about the Part-Time MBA Student Association. Maybe you listened to that episode, but it's great to have you here to share your stories as well with our listeners. Of course, we're also going to be talking about the case method and what this learning experience is like. And so appreciate you taking some time out of your day to be here for the podcast. So let's start with just checking in, see how everybody's doing. Aman, how are things going?
They're going good. I think, second quarter of the second semester, we're finally finding a rhythm. We were able to send out a survey for committees for the Part-Time Student Association, and we got a great response on that. We've gotten to know our cohort really well after these 2 semesters. So, we're just beginning to hit our stride and having a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's hard to believe y'all are in quarter 4 or just kicking off quarter 4. And you got leading organizations in finance this quarter. Is that right?
Correct.
Excellent. All right. Zach, how are you doing?
Yeah, doing well. Echo everything that Aman said. I think my experience so far with this program is it's all learn by doing. And that's everything from actually discussing the course material to getting to know people to just figuring out the contours of the new part-time format. And so big shout out to people like Max and Parker and Aman for leading the student governance and kind of shaping this experience for all of us.
Yeah, it's great. It's been great to see your class really embrace the opportunity of being the first students through the door, so to speak, and all the incredible things that you've been doing from career standpoint. Lots of great programming the career team's been working on. In addition, social opportunities for your classmates. That's been fun to see the community start together and just the energy you'll have when you're in person. You could clear that the group really enjoys each other. So I always enjoy being around on those evenings and just seeing y'all, build those relationships over the course of your time here. So Zoe, how about you? How are things going?
They're good. Yeah, it's exciting to, at least for the social aspect, to get to know our learning team more and kind of our cohort. I'm all about the social aspects, so it's great, getting to know people. And we just switched seats for this new quarter, so it'll be cool, getting to know the people next to us.
Have you changed seats every quarter or every couple quarters? How's it worked?
Yeah, so we change seats every quarter. So every time there's a new set of classes, the first day we're always a little nervous, like, oh, are we going to be seated in the front or in the back? Who are we going to get, seated next to? This quarter and last quarter, I sat next to Zach, so I only have to get to know one new person next to me.
That's right. We lucked out 2 quarters in a row. I mean, having class in the same classroom, but with different seats, completely new experience, really changes your perspective. So excited that we get to, share that space with some new folks.
One of the things that's fun about the part-time program is that you will be taking classes together as a group, as a cohort for the first year and a half of the program, first 18 months. And so that section identity, right? The fact that you're just all together, shared experience, it's something that really struck me when the first few weeks saw y'all come together, and it's just every night. Then the second quarter, same group of people, and the third quarter, and now the fourth quarter. That has to be contributing to like your sense of community, the esprit de corps within the group, just consistently learning with the exact same group of people. Would you say that's accurate?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the better we get to know each other, the closer we get. You see, the seating chart changes every quarter. And then you see, like, if you walk into dinner before classes, you see those tables change. every quarter as well. So we're getting to know each other. I think we're also learning a lot from each other and our experiences from work. And I think it's adding a lot to our case discussion as well, because the better we get to understand each other, the more open we are in our discussions and the better time we have. And, there's that understanding that we're all here to learn, whether it be from the professor or from each other's experiences. So it's been really fantastic.
Yeah, we also have a Discord group, and some of us follow each other on social media, so it's really cool to see who's having a baby, who's getting married, who got engaged. We've had many milestones already, and it's really cool to come in to dinner and then hear someone congratulate the other person. And me being nosy, I always have to figure out, ooh, what's going on, like who got married, who's getting engaged, and all of that. So it's good to invest in each other's lives, I think. And that's something that I didn't expect. And so it's a cool opportunity.
And Zoe does an especially good job of that. Our chief birthday officer, making sure that everyone feels celebrated and is really cool. So that's awesome.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. We never miss a single life event because of Zoe. She does a great job of managing our Discord and reminding us of, school events as well. So big thanks to her.
Zoe, how did you become the chief birthday officer and the person who is like keeping everyone organized around these major life events that are occurring within your class?
So during residency, I think we had a couple of birthdays a few birthdays that we missed because, we didn't really know each other. And so I felt really bad because, I don't know, to me, birthdays are very important. It's like a celebration of life, celebration of person's, personality and like what they've done. And so I figured I can't let that slide. So from now on, I have to make sure everyone knows for better or for worse.
I love that. And y'all have had some social outings too. I think at the end of every quarter, there's the final Friday celebration. And Zoe, I also feel like you've been instrumental. Have you been the person that's coordinating the various cookie swaps, dessert swaps that have happened over the first few quarters?
Yeah, but I have to give credit to the social team and the PSA for doing the final Fridays. They've really been able to get everyone together, and we get to see people outside of a classroom context. With a few, a couple of beers in, everyone's personality changes and I think loosens up, which is, I think, all part of the, connection experience.
And we also have finals every 7 weeks. So there's a lot of opportunities to get together over the course of the year.
Yeah.
But who's counting?
Who's counting?
All right. Well, let's do introductions, and then we'll kind of get into the meat of our conversation about the learning experience here at Darden. Zach, why don't we have you start this one? Tell us a little bit more about you, your background, and what you do now.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Zach Gore. I work in product management and strategy for a cybersecurity company called Palo Alto Networks. I joined that company through an acquisition. So got to experience kind of the fascinating changeover in corporate ownership and culture and the way things get done. Prior to that, I was a full-time grad student. I was pursuing a master's in public policy. And I actually started my career just down the street from Sands Family Grounds in Roslyn. I was a consultant with Deloitte in their government and public services practice.
All right, Zoe, tell us about you. Who are you and what's your background?
I'm Zoe. I work in government consulting. I'm in a small firm called LMI out in Tysons. I do data analysis involving healthcare and kind of working with the ACA and healthcare.gov, making sure that insurance companies are providing the proper care, especially for people who are, lower in the or a percentage of the federal poverty level, just make sure that they're getting the care that they need. I studied operations research and engineering in college. So this is a little bit of a shift for me as I'm transitioning to business. I don't necessarily know if I'm going to switch to business, but I think it's good to get to know more about the world.
Excellent. All right, Aman, tell us about you. Who are you and what's your background?
Hey, so my name's Aman Dar. I'm at Cognizant Technology Solutions. I work in the M&A advisory and corporate strategy group. I advise clients on anywhere from pre-deal all the way to post-deal implementation. So I'll do due diligence on the IT infrastructure all the way to actually doing the implementation of the merger, separation, or restructuring. Before Cognizant, I was at Booz Allen Hamilton, where I focused a lot on government strategy and their strategic innovations group. I have a master's in finance from the George Washington University, and I also have an undergrad in finance. So the MBA was huge for me to sort of get a lens outside of that whole finance bubble that I've been living in.
I appreciate your point there, Aman. We actually have a blog Q&A with one of your classmates, Danny, and she is talking in that blog about how the program has really helped widen her view of things. Like she, works in a fairly technical role, and it's really, the program has really helped her see how all the pieces fit together, the big picture. It sounds like maybe that's been your experience. Maybe that's this group's experience. What would y'all say about that?
Yeah, I think for myself, I think the MBA has been great and sort of giving me that holistic view and that, up top view of everything that goes on in business. Because I've spent a lot of time personally doing implementation work within the weeds. So it's really interesting to take a step back and see how these decisions are made before you even get to the implementation point. And personally, I don't really have much experience in, per se, marketing or operations or putting together a strategy at a C-suite level. So, working with world-renowned faculty at Darden and learning from them and actually discussing with guys like Zach, who does corporate strategy work, it's been a real eye-opener, just understanding the different functions and different things that are out there in the world.
Yeah, I think for me, the MBA has been really about evolution and exploration. So diving into those areas that were gaps in my knowledge base. I have a policy analysis background. My expectation leaving that program was to go into government and work on policy implementation and analysis and things like that. As the pandemic started to pick up and the kind of landscape of the job market changed, landed at a cybersecurity startup, which was not my expectation, and really exposed some fundamental gaps in what I knew and how to operate kind of on the private sector side, but working with public sector customers. And even in just the 4 quarters that we've had so far, getting exposure to the accounting curriculum, some of the early finance curriculum, and just understanding the language that businesses speak when they talk about how they do different things and the decisions that get made has been really, really valuable. And I think just a big plug to you, Brett, and the admissions team for pulling together such a diverse group of people for our cohort and getting to learn from people like Zoe and like Aman, who have these different competencies and experiences, really amplifies what I'm getting in the classroom beyond just kind of the case discussion.
Yeah, I think everything's new to me. I coming out of engineering background, everything was, theory and number crunching, and even at my work is a lot of Excel and Python and coding. So I think my worldview was very limited. So being able to see all of this, especially through the case method, a nice little segue, but it's really cool to see different companies and corporations and seeing everything on, a private sector instead of just with government. It's been really cool.
Well, let's talk about what led you to Darden, and then we'll transition the conversation a little bit. Zoe, how did you land at Darden?
Yeah, well, it's a long story, but the long story short is that I didn't do well necessarily in my undergrad. So I felt that it wasn't very reflective of, I think, my intelligence. And so I wanted to kind of get a new start to kind of prove to myself that after a few years of working in the, working in the real world, I can go back and kind of perhaps prove to myself that maybe it was a major that I chose that wasn't the right fit for me, and to go in and kind of really put my all into it. I think for your undergrad, you're kind of you're still trying to get used to the world around you and working on social aspects and like figuring out who you are. But now I'm at a later, life stage Even though it's like a difference of 4 or 5 years. But to be able to kind of devote myself to learning something for the sake of learning instead of going to college for the sake of getting a degree. Yeah. And so then I found Darden through a Metro advertisement at like on a random Thursday. And I applied and I got in.
Well, I appreciate the Metro ads shout out. I always take pictures of them when I see our ads on the Metro, and it's it's good to hear that people are seeing those too, and it's working. It's getting people interested in the program. Your point about perhaps writing a different story about yourself educationally, that's one that it's very powerful, and it's one that I've heard from a number of our students, and particularly executive MBA students who I've talked with over the 7-8 years that I've been here at Darden. For many of those students, this was a chance to set a different narrative about who they are as a student. And it's such an intentional choice, right? Coming back at this point, thinking about taking this step, you put a lot of effort and energy to deciding that this is what you want to do. So I appreciate that as well. Aman, what led you to Darden?
So I had always wanted to do an MBA, but I sort of always thought that, over the past 2 years that my time had sort of passed to do my MBA. I did my master's in finance, which was a bit technical, and I had just gotten married a couple of years back. So I just didn't know how I would be able to sort of leave work and go pursue a full-time MBA. One of my direct reports, he had just done his MBA and he was going to Saudi Arabia. And I was actually just telling him, I would love to do an MBA because I have this finance education and I would love to learn, the holistic, understanding of business in general. And he actually told me that Darden was starting their first part-time MBA program. And I think I put in a request for more information, and Brett, you called me, and, we had a great conversation. And one thing that really attracted me was you mentioned to me the case method approach and how, Darden does it in a few other schools like Harvard. And that sort of resonated with me because of my learning style, because I prefer to learn by doing. And when I was thinking about just like leaving a hard day's work and going to class, the last thing I wanted to do was get lectured to. I wanted to have a discussion and actually talk about the pre-work that I spent hours doing before. So that was one of the things. And then also just the reputation of being a global top-tier business school and the opportunity to become a part of, an inaugural cohort like this was just something that I didn't think I wanted to pass up. And I grew up in the Northern Virginia area as well. My mom always wanted me to go to UVA, but I never really got there. So this is for my mom. And, I hope she's happy now. So I'll have that Darden degree at some point.
I love that. Shout out for your mom. Special dedication. That's fantastic. And I will say, it's been great to have the part-time. We get all kinds of questions about, why the part-time MBA program? Why did we launch this? We had the executive MBA program up here, have a specialized master's, MSBA. Why the part-time MBA? And what we shared with prospective students is that, we sensed as we were talking with people here in the market that there were people looking for a part-time MBA. We did not have a part-time MBA, but if Darden did have one, they'd be very excited that there was such an option available. And the executive MBA program has a preferred work experience minimum of 5 years, and that tends to be a bit more of an experienced group of students. The average is 11 to 12, although if you look at the distribution of that class, it is pretty broad, 5 to 25 years. But part-time MBA, as you know from interacting with your classmates, it's an earlier career student. And that's really what we had in mind when we talked with the faculty and as we've engaged with prospective students. People are just a little bit earlier in their career, look more honestly, like the full-time students here at Darden in terms of age and career stage. And I think it's been a great addition. We're meeting people that we wouldn't have met otherwise. We did not have an option for folks just a couple of years ago. And now here, the part-time MBAs here, we have an inaugural cohort working on class number 2. It's been great to meet people who are looking at working while pursuing their degree and want to do it in this format. So, Zach, how about you? What led you to Darden?
Yeah, I think for me, having just come out of a full-time grad program a couple of years earlier, and then kind of gotten through the darkest days of the pandemic, I knew I wanted to continue working, and I knew I wanted to stay in the DC area. And so that kind of limited the search parameters to a number of schools that are in the DC area that offer these types of evening or flex programs My partner is a alumna from UVA undergrad, went to the McIntyre School. So I've, had my ear talked off about the quality and value of the UVA business education. So I've sort of instinctively drawn to Darden. And when I saw that the part-time format was going to be a new offering that had a bit more flexibility in terms of the course schedule just being on weeknights and the hybrid format with in-person experience as well as online classes, I had a feeling that that was the right format for me. I travel a lot, both for work and for fun. And so having kind of the built-in option to do true distance learning, but also get the in-person experience between the residencies and then, the 6 or so hours that we have together over 2 nights every other week is like the perfect blend of all of those different aspects. So from a format perspective, it was incredibly appealing. I also had some prior exposure to the case method, both in undergrad and in graduate studies. And I found that was how I learned best. And so knowing that Darden, that was their primary or only kind of pedagogical method was really appealing as well.
All right. Well, that opens the door to a conversation about the case method. So we find that when we talk with prospective students, they don't always know exactly what the case method is and what it means, and maybe a little bit nervous to ask about it. And so, Aman, you mentioned that this was one of the things that was exciting to you about Darden, the fact that you would be an active participant in your learning experience. When people ask you about the case method, how do you explain it to them?
So from my understanding and from my experiences, it's a participatory sort of learning approach where we analyze real world cases in a group setting. And oftentimes our professors have written those cases and actually spoken to those C-suite executives in order to figure out the nitty-gritty details of what was happening at the time. And us as the students, we take the role of decision makers and work together to sort of analyze the problem together and identify potential solutions to make a recommendation. And what's really interesting is the professor serves sort of like a facilitator, and they guide the discussion, and they're the ones responsible for asking thought-provoking questions to help, explore different perspectives. And it really encourages, active participation and critical thinking. And, I really enjoy it. It's not something where the professor standing up there and going through 100 slides, it's like they'll field a question and then we just sort of take it from there and sort of learn together as a group.
Zach, go ahead.
Sorry,
go ahead,
to add on to what Aman said, it's kind of a flip of the traditional teaching system in that you're required more to prepare in the beginning of the class, and then the class is used for discussion, versus like in a traditional setting, you have the teacher teach you, the different concepts, and then afterwards you have homework to kind of, to really solidify it in your brain. And I think because of that swap, it requires more preparation beforehand. So it definitely requires a certain amount of, effort on the part of the student to be able to be ready for class and to be ready to be called on. And it's also a sign of respect, I think, to your other, classmates. Like if you're not prepared, then you don't really have anything to contribute, and then it becomes kind of a cycle. And so I think I have to remind myself every time, it's the start of the week and I have to prep. I'm like, this is for me. This is for my classmates. Got to get ready for it.
The social contract of it all is very real, right? You have this obligation in multiple directions, not just to yourself, but to the people sitting around you and the faculty member. Zach, how do you explain the case method to people who don't know that much about it?
Yeah, I think for me, I really appreciate that you're essentially dropped into a real life scenario. So like Aman mentioned, most of these cases are either loosely based on or directly archived from real decisions that real people are making with incomplete information and kind of the tools that we have available to us as MBA students. And so as you're reading the case, it's typically written in a narrative format. There's a protagonist who is presented with some sort of data, a series of questions, or has to make a recommendation, usually to their boss, which is very relatable to any of us who have ever actually worked. That's the key of really any job is you have a problem or a question that needs to be answered. You're given some information. You got to go seek out more, use a framework, build a model, and then come to some conclusion and be able to justify it to external stakeholders. And in this case, those external stakeholders are primarily the folks in our cohort, the other people that have come prepared. And even from the same case PDF and the same facts and the same data, people come to different conclusions. And part of the richness of our learning is being able to have those discussions and uncover that, additional piece of analysis that I didn't do, that Zoe did, that really clarifies and crystallizes the concepts. And so it's much more stimulating and engaging in the classroom than it would be in a traditional lecture format. And at least for me, the process of prepping those cases individually, discussing with our smaller learning teams, kind of trading, how did you do this? How did you tackle that problem? And then coming to the class discussion and then kind of getting the collective knowledge of the group is really, really valuable.
I appreciate your comment there, Zach, because it opens up this kind of conversation around preparation, which Zoe also mentioned as well. Zoe, how do you prepare for class? What does it look like for you to prepare for one of these case discussions?
Yeah, so I guess we're put into learning teams in the beginning of the quarter or the program. So one of the things that we have to do is, discuss with our learning team beforehand. So what we do is we kind of assign each person like every week, or we assign 2 people per class to kind of teach the rest of the learning team on what to do. So if I'm in charge of this week, I would go in and read the cases. We have kind of a template to list out what are the notes that are in the case and kind of point out relevant parts, and to give some sort of background and also take the first stab at especially the computation part. And so then that's when I go in and look at the questions and try to figure it out. Oftentimes I do not know them, but I put in my best effort. And then when we meet with our learning team, we have a couple people say, hey, I tried it and I did this. So similar to what Zach said, we kind of work together to fill in the gaps that one person may not have, or one person may have had while preparing.
So everybody reads the case individually, and then someone is really kind of taking lead on the cases, and you come together for a group discussion in the learning team, and then class.
And I think it definitely takes off the pressure of having to be right with everything, because you have, 5 or 6 other people who can tell you, hey, I think you should actually do it this way, or hey, that's a really good point, I didn't know that. So for me, it takes off the pressure, and that's like 50% of it.
Yeah, sometimes people think they're going to have to do all this by themselves. And so I think it's one of the things that makes an MBA program feel daunting. It's like, oh my gosh, I don't know anything about accounting or finance or whatever the list is. And people think, I've got to figure this out all on my own. And what you realize, and I appreciate your comment, Zoe and Zach, and that this is a team sport, that you're not working by yourself. It's a collective effort. So Aman, tell us about how you prepare for one of these case discussions. What does it look like?
Yeah, so our learning team is really active. We meet, virtually every Sunday night and every Wednesday night, but then we also meet outside of that because we've become best friends now. So it's really awesome. It's a very organic way of how we sort of do things. We work on the cases individually alone, and there's no expectation to get through the entire case by the time we meet, and then we get together, have a discussion on the case, and then sort of teach each other things. And I think, we have to give a lot of props to yourself, Brett, and the rest of the faculty on how they sort of constructed our learning teams, because every single learning team sort of has a great mix of individuals. We have my team, we have an attorney, we have an engineer, we have someone who works government contracts, another one who does government strategy, and myself who has a finance background. So regardless of whatever case we do, we always have somebody who understands the concept very well and somebody who doesn't understand it as well. And, we're all teaching each other concepts, and we're all sort of getting better together in a team. And then once we take it to the cohort, to class itself, I think we have such a great relationship as a cohort now that if you look at our laptops, we're all on Teams talking to each other and discussing the case live while it's happening with the rest of the class. So we're all constantly giving each other advice. And it's like the preparation for the case doesn't even stop at the end of class. It goes on until you take the final, because we're continuously talking about cases and trying to get better. And it's interesting because the goal isn't to pass the class. The goal is to learn the concept well enough that we can apply it to our day-to-day lives. And I think that's the value of a part-time MBA, where we're sort of working, but then also learning these skills in parallel.
That's awesome. So Zach, I want to come back to you. You talked a little bit, sort of high level, about how you prepare for class. Can you bring us sort of down to how your learning team works together, how you prepare individually? What does your preparation process look like?
Yeah, I think my process looks very similar to Aman's. I'm, at least initially, an individual learner. So I want to make sure that I have a chance to read and internalize the cases, start to think about some of the questions and how to go about answering them. We also meet as a learning team at least once a week, oftentimes twice, before each kind of class session, because we have finance one day and leading organizations another day. It's easy to kind of load balance the cases across those two meetings. And we treat our learning team meeting similar to a mini class discussion. So each case has some guiding questions that the professor has provided. They're not intended to solve the case, but it's more to just get you thinking about the different concepts that are contained in it. And we just have a discussion. Hey, what for things that have an answer? Sometimes in finance there is an answer. How did you calculate that? What model did you use? What inputs? What cells are your formulas referencing? And other times it's a lot more conceptual of how should I be thinking about a particular concept or how to even go about approaching a problem. So those are incredibly valuable for just the pure learning, but also being prepped for class and getting ready to take that first cold call or follow up on a peer's point. One thing I did want to mention that I think I heard in both Zoe and Aman's answers is just kind of the team focus of a lot of this prep. I know at least on our team, we're all working professionals. We have busy, full lives, and just having the grace and the support system of your learning team on those weeks when things are a little bit tougher and the time management becomes challenging, to fall back on to say, even though I didn't get a chance to read this case inside and out and internalize every single fact and concept, I have a group of 5 other people standing behind me to help me with that learning, either before or after class. So it can be very easy and very daunting if you fall behind just because of the pacing of the course. And I think the learning team structure is really, really helpful for avoiding that sort of situation.
Appreciate that, and we do spend a fair amount of time, probably longer than people expect, that we spend thinking about the teams. There's a few different drafts of the teams as we go along. We typically will announce the learning teams a couple weeks prior to the start of school. That's actually earlier than if you go back a few years ago. We would typically announce the teams for our working professional students, but we found it's a nice social touch point for people, right? You have a chance to get to know people prior to the start of school. Of course, there's lots of other ways to connect and meet, but this is your learning team. And so nice to have a little bit of runway before the rubber meets the road, so to speak, to meet your teammates. And then also, one of the things that's true for part-time MBA students, residency 1, y'all are going to have class. So you want to also be able to have some opportunity to work with your team to prep a little bit as you go through that week. And it can be, I think it's just worked really well. And it's been great to see your teams work and you enjoy each other. And that's such great feedback for us. We love to hear that. So Zoe, you had mentioned this flipped classroom idea. And I want to talk a little bit about what class actually looks like. Because of course people can come for a class visit, but some of the people listening to this podcast may not necessarily be able to do that. And so can we talk about what like a case discussion looks like from a student perspective? Like how would you explain what you're doing in class?
Yeah. So like you said, we come in prepared. So we have certain talking points that we may want to get to. We have things that we are confident in, and others where we're not. So we might not pipe up during those times. So we will get to class, and usually I've seen what professors do is they kind of go over a general overview in the first maybe 10, 15 minutes of class, kind of asking students, what they know. So for example, about accounting, like, present value, I guess that's more finance, but present value or like different things. And so then we'll take notes on that, and then we'll kind of dive into the case. And so then the case, we will ask what is going on, who are the key players involved with this case, what is the issue at hand, and then we'll go through the kind of the discussion questions that the professor has given. It's not necessarily like they will ask exactly, what is the answer to this. Instead, we'll kind of work into it of like, what is the problem and how do we go about solving it? And then that's when we are, usually the professor will ask a lot more questions than give statements. So it is up to the students to kind of give statements and answers. And so sometimes the discussion will go one way. And I think sometimes the professors are they don't think that it's going to go this way, but they are, competent enough to work with it and to roll with it. And eventually we get back and, I think the professors have key points that they want to address, and somehow every class hopefully we end up addressing all of them through our discussions.
It's one of the interesting things. So it's a challenge for the faculty member, right? Because they have this pedagogical plan, the things that they're trying to make sure they cover over the course of the discussion. And of course, you get lots of different perspectives. People may see things. We had a mock class last night, and one of the participants noted something that the faculty member hadn't necessarily thought about related to the class. And that's one of the things that happens in the case method. You got 65 or so people in the room, all different perspectives. It's been mentioned a couple times. You just don't know what people are going to bring to that conversation. Same set of facts, same case, can be very different perspectives. So, Aman, what would you want to highlight about the learning experience, the actual in-class experience for prospective students who may not necessarily be as familiar with it?
I think it's if you've never experienced the case method taught by professionals like at Darden before, it's definitely something to sit in on and experience, because it's totally different from any other class I've ever been in. Because it almost seems like the professors, they obviously know the content well enough where they can drop in questions where it'll guide you to a direction where you'll start to ask the right questions yourself. And in order to crack the case, you start asking the questions, and it's like you begin answering your own questions. And the professor really has to do very little except sort of, make sure we're headed in the right direction. And one event that really stands out to me is we had a strategy case where we sort of veered off away from the case and started talking about something totally different. But then we circled back to the concepts of the case. And it just showed me, how exceptional some of these faculty members are, where, I feel like I'm the most distracted person on earth, and I miss all the things that I'm supposed to be looking at in the case and focus on all the wrong stuff. And there have been thousands of times where they've let me go that direction, but I always circle back learning the right things. And the cases themselves are marvelously constructed as well, because we had some finance cases initially where we had to go to a certain level of valuation. And given my master's in finance, I wanted to go a little bit further, but they're designed to make sure you learn the things that you're supposed to learn, and they're really exceptional.
Zach, what would you want to highlight about the in-class learning experience?
Yeah, I mean, completely agree with everything that's already been said. I think the really cool aspect of the outcome of this kind of discussion-based approach and the preparation that we do is, as I think about and prepare for the finals and applying some of these concepts from our coursework, my mental catalog of all these things is tied to individual cases. And so when I go back and think about how to do, cost-based or, allocating indirect costs from accounting 1, which was 6 months ago, I immediately think of Sparta Glass. Or when we are talking about strategic implementation and kind of how things get formulated and then executed at a company, I think of Cemex Cement from our strategy course. And so there's now this mental library that isn't just these abstract things floating around in your head that you have to go and apply on a final. It's much more tangible. And it's, this like memory bank where you can go back and think about that case and you're brought back to that discussion. And I can remember the specific point that Aman made that was so poignant that really clarified that case for me, and then take that with me, rather than just, sitting at a desk trying to cram material from a textbook or lecture slides, or a recorded course. And so the experience as a whole creates, I think, better outcomes in the learning process.
So one of the most common questions we get from prospective students, once we mention that Darden's case method school, you're going to learn in this way, can explain a little bit about what the case method is. The next question is something like, do you even learn accounting in this way? And so let's talk about what it's like to learn accounting through the case method. You've had an opportunity to do this already. So Zach, how would you explain what the experience of like learning accounting through the case method was like?
I really think it's just like learning material for any other class. I think accounting, and I felt this way coming into an MBA program with no prior business background. I think accounting has this kind of stigma that it's either incredibly complicated or incredibly dull. And I think that the case method directly addresses both of those common misconceptions. It brought the material to life in a very concrete way. I work in product management at a tech company. I'm not an accountant. I'm not even adjacent to our finance function, but there are accounting concepts that bear on the decisions that I make in my day-to-day work of how we price or package a product, and how do we recognize that revenue, and what are the implications for company performance. These are things that my manager's manager gets asked when we put proposals on the table to decide whether they get funding. And just being able to take that away and use it the day after we have a course. The case method allows you to kind of project yourself into that decision-making role. And it's really no different for accounting versus finance versus marketing or other kind of core curriculum classes that we take at Darden. And I've really appreciated that the focus is on understanding and application rather than just kind of mechanically putting together accounting journal entries or transactions and kind of mindlessly applying rules.
So what would you share about the experience of learning these more quantitative topics? I mean, to Zach's point, accounting, it's in all caps when people ask about it. There's something intimidating about this subject. Finance is also sometimes lumped in there. How would you explain learning these quantitative topics through the case method?
Yeah, I think for me, it was a bit of a learning adjustment. I won't, argue and say the case method is perfect. I think that there are certain things, like especially during a finals studying, where unfortunately the professor has to kind of test the knowledge that and so trying to find the balance between learning the concepts of accounting and the experience of accounting it did take a little bit of an effort. But the great thing about the Darden program is that there are supplemental materials that the professor gives. So there is the textbook, and also they have recorded videos that are they're like little series of 6 to 7 minute videos that basically is a class that drills down the concepts needed. So I think that was definitely helpful for me in terms of the accounting, since I've never done accounting before. There's also a Coursera that the program suggested before we started class, that I was able to kind of work through the specific problems. But specifically for the case method, I think there are ways to combat kind of that, maybe not disconnect, but the difference between real life and the concepts. There are cases that are not necessarily real world examples, but they are designed so that you are able to practice certain accounting problems and write, journal entries that aren't necessarily like Microsoft is doing this. Instead, it will say like John Deere is doing, accounting for his company and needs to create 5 journal entries. And so having that is definitely helpful. Yeah.
So lots of opportunities to practice, test your knowledge. I appreciated the point also about the videos and the pre-matriculation resources, which we make available. Aman, you mentioned having this finance background. You've done a master's in finance. You're now learning finance here in quarter 4 through the case method. What's it like to learn these more quantitative topics through the case method?
I think it's a lot of fun because my master's, there was a mix of case, but then also a mix of classroom instruction. And I feel like the case method there's a lot of people who have in our cohort who have a finance background as well. And what I've noticed from speaking to them and from my own experience as well is like, regardless of where you're at, there's always something to learn from the case. And since there's rarely ever a right answer and you're evaluating your judgment and what you're supposed to do to sort of crack the case, and then what actually happened in the case at the end of it, if we have sort of that insight as well, you're sort of benchmarking your work against that. So it's been very interesting to sort of work on something as simple as, direct and indirect cost allocation and the treatment of indirect and direct costs, and how that sort of affects your perspective as a manager. Because if you understand why we're sort of doing the MBA, it's sort of to become better managers and become better leaders. So the case method really lends itself well to sort of understand how these numbers are being created, but then, how the creation of these numbers might lead to different insights. And as a manager, you sort of have to lean on those insights in order to make key decisions and also communicate things up the chain. So I think just having that holistic understanding of all of those different components once we get to the end of the semester and see all of those cases sort of fit together into accounting, I think that's pretty invaluable and extremely interesting. And then in addition to that, we actually have a couple of accountants in our cohort as well. So when we're doing the discussion on the case itself, it's really interesting to see where they approach it from, given their, wealth of real life experience around it. So, it's a lot of fun, but it's not sort of just reading something out of a textbook. You can actually go home and pull a 10K and apply the things you learned in class that day, which is extremely powerful. Whereas when I look back and think about some of the things I learned in my master's, it's like, okay, I learned it in a textbook, but I really don't know the practical application of this. So, I think Darden really prides itself on the ability to give you a toolbox of skill sets that you can actually practically apply in the real world, which is really fantastic.
Yeah, we actually had one of our accounting classes during my company's earnings call recently. So it was really interesting to see, hey, we've done this quarter's worth of financial statement analysis, and then to watch, the CFO of my company talk through, all of the top line numbers and the implications, and then how like the broader market and the analysts are thinking about it. It kind of ties together all these different threads that we're learning as part of the core curriculum in order to eventually become, successful managers. So completely agree with all of that.
Question, a little bit more of a sort of existential question. Do you feel like you've gotten better at learning through the case method over the course of your 7-8 months in the program thus far? Zoe, do you feel like it's gotten easier? I mean, you're getting new topics, from, all the time. And so you go from quarter to quarter as new classes, but you feel like you're getting your rhythm here?
Yeah, the topics are getting harder, I have to say, but I think the process of preparing using the case method has gotten easier. Definitely, it's a mind switch, and but yeah, it's easier, but life doesn't come easy, so.
Aman, do you feel like the case method you're getting your sea legs under you at this point?
Yeah, I think we've finally started to hit a rhythm. It's more so, before I think my first quarter I had to actively, do things, and now it's become sort of muscle memory and second nature where it's like I know I have, in-person class on this day. I have to prepare my case for this learning team meeting on this day. So we're sort of getting into the swing of things. And I think after being in the fourth quarter, what helps a lot is looking at other learning teams and how they sort of approach things. Like Zoe's team has a very structured method of how they assign cases and go through cases. And some other teams have a bit more unstructured, way they go about things. So it's just interesting to see how other people approach it and sort of evolve your own methods quarter to quarter to sort of, better suit the class that we're taking on. So last quarter we had two quantitative classes and it was a grind, but we were able to lean on each other and really adjust the way we were able to do things. And this semester we're lucky to have LO, so we're going to spend more time having discussions in our learning team rather than figuring out why our evaluation is coming up at the wrong number. So it's exciting, but it's always a constant evolution, and we're just waiting for the next curveball to be thrown at us.
How about you, Zach? You feel like learning through the case method getting a little bit easier these days?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm getting better at it, but I'm definitely getting more comfortable with it. And I think the big mindset shift with the case method is really two things. The first is the professor is not going to answer your question directly. So if you raise your hand and you say, what is the right answer or the right number, they are going to deflect that right back to you and right back to the group to help out. And so part of it is just getting comfortable with that, with being uncomfortable if you're kind of still trying to catch up with the material and relying on that course discussion to carry you forward. And the other piece is some questions don't actually have a right answer. It's very different than prepping with a worksheet that's fill in the blank or multiple choice where you're just kind of mechanically going through and taking what you've learned. It's much more teaching you how to approach problems than that there is one right answer. And I think now in Q4, we're really in full swing, having accepted both of those facts. And, we even joke and laugh. I've raised my hand and said, I know you're not going to answer this question, but, and then asked the question and was inevitably deflected back to the group. But you still learn something from those experiences, and, not being afraid to raise your hand and say, I don't get this, someone please help me, is a big part of it too.
Yeah, to our listeners, don't underestimate the value of a good question in a case discussion, or just even saying, "I'm sorry, this is not making any sense. Can we just talk about this for a second?" There's value in that. You're probably not the only person who has that feeling.
It's true. Yeah. When I hear someone else ask, like, I don't understand, I'm like, oh, good. So I don't have to say that.
Yeah, another thing is when somebody else has a question or asks a question that you wanted to ask the whole time, and you're just like, oh, thank God, I'm so happy you asked that. So that happens all the time. And I think like the better we've gotten to know each other, the more comfortable we've gotten at asking questions. And, we realize there are no stupid questions because we're just there to learn. So oftentimes in the back of my mind where I'm just like, I want to ask this, but I'm afraid it's going to be a stupid question and somebody else asks it. So there's no better feeling than that, knowing that, somebody else has the same problems that you do going through this case.
All right. Well, last question for y'all. There's been a lot of great insight about the learning experience here at Darden, how you prepare for class, so many good takeaways. But I wonder, a piece of advice for our listeners, something you would encourage them to think about as they consider their own MBA journeys. Aman, what would you highlight for our listeners?
So it goes by really fast. Like I feel like yesterday I was in residency 1 in Charlottesville, meeting Zoe and Zach for the first time. So my advice would be, take a deep breath, take it one step at a time, and, make the most of your time at Darden because it's an exceptional place. You're going to meet exceptional people. Everybody is going to be wanting to help you out in your career, professional, and academic journey. So take advantage of that. There's a lot of groups and extracurricular activities that are not only offered to the full-time MBA students, but they're also offered to part-time MBA and executive students. And, we really get the same educational experience that they get in the full-time program. So take time to not only work on the cases, but also meet other students in your cohort, go get involved in different organizations, go down to Charlottesville and explore the main campus and, build a rapport and, a relationship with your faculty and professors. And I think, regardless of the case method and the instruction and all of the stuff that we do in class, there's so much you can gain from the people outside of class as well. So I would definitely say stay plugged in on all aspects.
How about you, Zach? A word of advice for our listeners?
Yeah, it might sound cliche, but just do it. If you're on the fence about applying or you've been admitted and are not sure whether you want to do the program, I think that Darden has really distilled everything that they've learned from the executive MBA format and moving it up to DC to create a program that is simultaneously challenging but very manageable for folks that are also working full time. And you're going to do some prep on weekends, you're going to do some prep during the week, and you're going to be in class for 3 hours a couple of nights a week. And those are kind of the realities of the program. But all of the extracurriculars that Aman mentioned and the community and the opportunities that you have to engage with different aspects of Darden and UVA is so worth it. So my advice is to just come to one of our classes. We love having guests. It's fun for us. One of the tipping points for me was actually coming on a tour of Sands Family Grounds and seeing the view of the river and the monuments in DC. It's a spectacular location. Great place to learn, although can be a little distracting when the nights get longer and we're in class. You can look out over the river. But yeah, just do it. And kind of the rest of it starts to fall into place between the time management and load balancing across other responsibilities with life. You can be done. And, each of us is doing it in a slightly different way, but we're all still here and we're all still having a good time.
All right, Zoe, you get the last word here. A piece of advice for our listeners.
I think Aman and Zach had great points. My advice is something that I learned actually this Monday from my fellow cohort. My advice is to get your snacks during the break and not before class, because then you have something to look forward to, during the break. But if you get your snacks before class, then you have to eat double snacks, and that's double the calories.
All right. So our listeners are wondering, what's this about snacks? You gotta set the scene a little bit here.
You're right. So for in-person class, there's a snack bar provided for you to make sure that, you're sustained energy wise, and also, it uplifts the mental health aspect. And usually they put out the snacks before class. And so sometimes I have no self-control and I will grab my gummy bears and my cookies before class. And then I eat it during the first lesson. And then it gets to the break and I have to refrain from grabbing, second portions. And so I have nothing to look forward to. But if you get them during the break, you have something to look forward to in your first class.
Yeah, the snack consumption is very much a strategic choice. Caffeine at 6 p.m. can be a little bit of a challenge if you're trying to power through a long day. And so a little bit of sugar rush at just the right moment is exactly what you need to finish out a case discussion.
There's always decision analysis in every aspect of your life.
Powered by gummy bears and Cavalier Crunch.
Yeah, you got to strategize.
Well, I want to thank y'all for doing this. It's great to be able to feature your stories and also such a great conversation about the case method. As I mentioned, so many of our prospective students, they're interested in it. It sounds interesting. They just don't know exactly what it is sometimes. And it's great to hear your perspectives on not only how you prepare for class and work with your learning teams, but actually what happens in the classroom and what the faculty member is doing there. And to your point, they're not going to tell you an answer. They want you to exercise judgment and to wrestle with things a little bit and use the resources you have around you, whether that's your learning team, other people in the cohort, all of that. So enjoyed catching up with all of you today, and I look forward to seeing you all later tonight for your in-person class.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity, Brett.
Thanks, Brett.
Thanks, Brett. It's been a great time. See you tonight.
And that was a conversation with 3 first-year students from our part-time MBA class of 2025, Zach Gore, Aman Dar, and Zoe Chan. As always, if you have any comments, suggestions, requests, anything you'd like for us to cover here on the podcast, we're all ears. We can be reached at Darden, that's DARDEN, @virginia.edu. Till next time, stay safe, be well, and thanks for listening.